Is Canada quietly cutting ties with the US? Nuclear submarines, radar systems, and a chilling message from Ottawa: 60 billion in submarines, 6 billion in radar. A 19 billion F-35 deal on the edge of collapse. One of America's closest allies is quietly stepping out of its shadow. Nuclear submarines not made in USA. Earlier this month, the French nuclear-powered submarine FS Tourville docked in Halifax, Nova Scotia, just 300 miles from the US border. But this wasn't a diplomatic visit. It was a live demonstration of France's latest naval technology for Canadian defense officials. Canada is now preparing to replace its aging submarine fleet in a modernization plan worth 60 billion Canadian dollars, roughly 42 billion USD. They plan to acquire between 6 and 12 nuclear-powered submarines, specifically for long-duration operations in the Arctic, where competition for control is intensifying. In the past, major arms deals like this almost always went to American companies. This time, France is leading. Backed by its Barracuda-class submarine program and a strengthening defense partnership with Ottawa, long-range radar, choosing Australia over the US. Shortly after, Canada announced a major investment, 6 billion Canadian dollars, into the JORN radar system, developed in Australia. JORN is an over-the-horizon radar capable of detecting aircraft and ships up to 3,000 kilometers away by bouncing radio waves off the ionosphere, covering the vast Arctic region in real time. What's striking is this. Canada bypassed all the US defense giants. No Lockheed Martin, no Raytheon, no Northrop Grumman. Why? Because Canada no longer trusts American defense consistency. The Arctic is too critical to leave in the hands of uncertain alliances. Canada wants sovereign surveillance, free of foreign pressure, even from its southern neighbor. F-35 deal under review. Then came the bombshell. Canada is now reconsidering its $19 billion contract to buy 88 F-35 fighter jets from the US. The agreement was signed in 2023, and Canada has only paid for the first 16 units so far. But now, the government is reviewing the entire deal and may switch suppliers. Defense Minister Bill Blair called it a necessary strategic decision to protect Canadian sovereignty. But analysts are calling it what it really is: the strongest warning Canada has sent to the Pentagon in over 30 years. NATO allies are watching, and this shift isn't isolated. Just weeks ago, Portugal canceled its own F-35 procurement, citing unpredictable US foreign policy as a key risk for NATO unity. Portuguese Defense Minister Nuno Melo made it clear, we must rethink our reliance on a partner whose positions change too quickly. And that's the heart of the issue. Can a unified defense system survive when its central pillar becomes volatile and erratic? A post-NORAD era? For decades, NORAD, the North American Aerospace Defense Command, was a symbol of unshakable trust between Canada and the US. But behind closed doors, Ottawa is quietly building alternative systems, from Australian radar to French submarines and more European tech contracts. Canada is not just diversifying suppliers, it's restructuring its entire defense ecosystem, piece by piece. This is not just procurement, it's a strategic realignment of historic proportions. Stay tuned to see how Europe, Asia, and Washington respond next. Trump wants Greenland, but does he know that this strategy is pushing the world into a trade war? And this could cost you when buying a car. Tensions are rising, and the ripple effects might make things more expensive for everyday consumers.
We need Greenland for national security purposes. I've been told that for a long time.
Trump is making waves again by reproposing the idea of buying Greenland. With its rich resources and strategic location, he believes it's a steal for US national security. But this story is not as simple as he thinks. Greenland and Denmark have responded strongly.
Dear President Trump, listen very carefully. Greenland has been part of the Danish kingdom for 800 years. It's an integrated part of our country. It is not for sale.
And it's not just Greenland. Europe, especially Germany and France, have sided with Denmark and strongly opposed the idea. This is not just a territorial dispute, but a struggle over sovereignty and the right to self-determination. So, how does this affect you? It's the US-EU trade war. Trump has bluntly accused the EU of unfair trade practices, claiming that millions of European cars flood US roads, while American cars face numerous barriers to entering the European market. With this move, Trump is not only pushing for higher tariffs on European cars, but also threatening major car manufacturers like Volkswagen, BMW, and Mercedes, forcing them to reconsider their expansion plans in the US. But Europe is not backing down easily. Ursula von der Leyen, President of the European Commission, has declared that the EU will retaliate strongly if tariffs are imposed. German and French leaders, including Chancellor Olaf Scholz and President Emmanuel Macron, have stated that they cannot accept such a trade imbalance. If a tariff war occurs, you might end up paying more when buying a car. Car prices will rise, and if you're looking to buy a Tesla electric car, this will directly impact you. The crisis doesn't stop at the trade war. Tesla, the leader in the electric vehicle industry, is now facing a new storm. Denmark, once one of Tesla's key markets in Europe, has made Musk headache as the country's pension funds collectively pull out of Tesla. The reason? Tesla's stance against unions and its refusal to sign collective bargaining agreements with workers. Funds like Pension Denmark and Academiker Pension, with billions of dollars in assets, have lost patience with Tesla and decided to remove the company from their investment portfolios. This not only affects Tesla's image, but also fuels growing public dissatisfaction with the company's labor policies. On top of that, strikes across Northern Europe, especially in Denmark, have blocked Tesla vehicles, escalating tensions between Tesla and labor unions in Europe. And so, we are faced with an undeniable truth. Tesla, once a symbol of innovation, is now facing a crisis. In Germany, the largest electric car market in Europe, Tesla's sales dropped by 76% in just February 2025. Meanwhile, the electric vehicle market as a whole saw a 30% growth. What's the reason? Tesla is losing the consumer trust, and this is not because their cars are bad, but because of labor issues and the increasing competition from European car manufacturers. Especially German consumers, a nation known for their love of brands like Mercedes and BMW, are now turning their backs on Tesla. A recent survey shows that up to 94% of Germans no longer want to buy a Tesla. This proves that the rise of European electric car makers like Volkswagen and Renault is slowly reclaiming Tesla's market share. And it's not just that. Elon Musk's increasing involvement in European politics, especially his support for the far-right AfD party in Germany, is further eroding Tesla's public trust.
Frankly, too much of a focus on past guilt, and we need to move beyond that. Children should not be guilty of the sins of their parents.
So, what do you think? Are you willing to pay more for a Tesla car in the future? But don't rush to conclusions, because the next developments will be even more surprising. Last February, 500,000 Canadians stopped crossing the US border. Tourism numbers have plummeted, hitting the lowest point since the 2022 pandemic. And it doesn't stop there. American goods are now facing a massive boycott in Canada. So, what's really happening? And more importantly, is this the sign of a major shift? This story might just surprise you. Donald Trump and Canadian politics. What's happening? Beyond trade and military tensions, a political firestorm is now unfolding. In a recent statement, Donald Trump hinted that he prefers working with Canada's current government over Conservative leader Pierre Poilievre. And just like that, the debate in Canada exploded. Key questions emerge. Why now? Why did Trump make such a public statement about Canadian politics? Could this affect Canada's upcoming election? And more importantly, what does this mean for US-Canada relations? This is one of the rare times a former US president has openly weighed in on Canada's internal politics. And it signals something big. US-Canada relations are entering a new phase. One that is anything but simple. Are Canadians abandoning America? For years, Canada has been one of the most critical markets for the US. Millions of Canadians cross the border for shopping, tourism, and business, especially in places like New York, Michigan, and Washington. But now, that trend is reversing. According to US Customs and Border Protection, in February 2024, 2.2 million Canadian travelers entered the US. That's 500,000 fewer than the same period last year. And it's the lowest number since April 2022. And it's not just about fewer tourists. Canadians are also spending less on American products. Data from the Business Development Bank of Canada reveals sales of American goods in Canada have dropped by 6%. Meanwhile, demand for Canadian-made products is surging. So why are Canadians changing their spending and travel habits? The answer may be tied to a crucial decision made by the US on February 1st. U.S. imposes new tariffs. How is Canada responding? On February 1st, the U.S. government announced new tariffs on Canadian imports, set to take effect on April 2nd. The consequences? Canadian goods will become more expensive in the U.S., making them less competitive. Industries like agriculture and manufacturing will take a direct hit. The Canadian government wasted no time in responding. Foreign Minister Melanie Joly made it clear, despite the upcoming U.S. election, Canada will protect its economy and jobs. But the most significant reaction, it came from the Canadian people. They cut back on spending at U.S. stores. Canadian businesses reported a sharp increase in domestic sales. And this may be just the beginning of a much bigger shift. Is Canada reducing its dependence on the U.S.? It's not just about trade. Canada is also moving toward military independence from the U.S. right now. The Canadian government is in talks with the European Union, searching for alternatives to U.S. defense contracts. And here's a big move. Canada is considering dropping its F-35 fighter jet deal with the U.S. in favor of Sweden's Gripen, made by Saab. Why the shift? U.S. trade policies are unpredictable, making reliance on American defense a risk. Canada-EU ties are strengthening, creating new strategic opportunities. Canada wants more control over its own defense industry. If this trend continues, Canada's military relationship with the U.S. could shift significantly. And that's not the only issue making headlines. Key takeaways. Donald Trump's remarks on Canadian politics could shift diplomatic relations between the two nations. 500,000 fewer Canadians are crossing into the U.S. Tourism has plummeted. Sales of American goods in Canada have dropped 6%, while Canadian-made products are thriving. The U.S. imposed new tariffs on Canadian goods, set to take effect April 2nd. Canada is exploring new defense partnerships, potentially ditching U.S. fighter jets for Sweden's Gripen. But the biggest question remains, is this the beginning of a new era between the U.S. and Canada? Stay tuned. There's much more to uncover.
Division over tactics that still exist within the Democratic Party. But there's going to be so much other matters to digest in this room, to different guests that are in the audience. Elon Musk.
From unrealistic economic promises to shocking territorial plans and the unofficial empowerment of Elon Musk, this speech exposed numerous contradictions in Trump's policies. Could this be a sign of a deeply unstable presidency? Trump claimed he would end inflation immediately and bring prices down. He stated,
In addition, as part of our tax cuts, we want to cut taxes on domestic production and all manufacturing. And just as we did before, we will provide 100% expensing.
However, within the same week as his speech, the stock market plunged 1,300 points. Prices for essential goods like food, building materials, and electronics continue to rise. An economic expert commented on national media. Trump's claims do not reflect reality. His tariff policies and trade wars with Canada and China have driven up raw material costs, leading to inflation, not reducing it. This stark contrast between his speech and the economic situation faced by Americans raises serious concerns about the feasibility of his promises. Beyond economic concerns, Trump also shocked the international community with his aggressive territorial ambitions. He announced before Congress,
And I also have a message tonight for the incredible people of Greenland. We strongly support your right to determine your own future. And if you choose, we welcome you into the United States of America. We need Greenland for national security and even international security, and we're working with everybody involved to try and get it. But we need it really for international world security. And I think we're going to get it. One way or the other, we're going to get it.
This statement was immediately met with backlash from Denmark. The Danish Prime Minister had previously stated, Greenland is not for sale, and the idea is completely absurd. But Trump didn't stop there. He went on to declare that the U.S. should reclaim control of the Panama Canal.
The Panama Canal was built by Americans for Americans, not for others.
Yet, in reality, Panama regained full sovereignty over the canal in 1999. The Panamanian government quickly responded, condemning Trump's remarks as a serious violation of their national sovereignty. These statements not only strain diplomatic relations with allies, but also raise the question, is Trump truly focused on protecting America, or is he pursuing a reckless expansion of power? During his speech, Trump declared his intention to dismantle bureaucratic institutions and remove unelected officials.
And the days of rule by unelected bureaucrats are over.
However, just days before, his administration canceled a major telecommunications contract with Verizon and redirected it to Elon Musk's Starlink. A political commentator wrote on social media, "Ironically, Trump speaks about eliminating bureaucracy, yet he hands over a portion of the government to a tech billionaire." Elon Musk is now acting as an unofficial vice president. Even Trump's supporters were taken aback by this move. Conservative media personality Dave Portnoy commented, "I have to admit, this one didn't quite land. Elon Musk is basically co-president now." While Trump claims to remove unelected officials, he is simultaneously granting unprecedented power to an individual outside the government. This contradiction raises a fundamental concern. Who is really running Trump's administration?
Korean trade authorities say a communication channel is ready with the U.S. to discuss tariffs.
If the U.S. doesn't open its doors, South Korea will open another one, and that door is Canada. The world is changing, and North America and Asia could create a new supply chain that will make the U.S. reconsider its position.
And South Korea's average tariff is 4 times higher. Think of that, 4 times higher. And we give so much help militarily and in so many other ways to South Korea, but that's what happens.
While the U.S. and China are clashing in the trade war, and Canada faces shifting strategies from its allies, South Korea is finding a way to sneak through the back door, bypassing strict U.S. tariffs and getting closer to a new strategic partner, Canada. Let's explore why and the far-reaching impacts this could have on the global economy. South Korea's Plan B is not just a simple pivot, but a long-term strategy to build deeper ties with Canada, a country holding vital natural resources that South Korea needs, especially oil, gas, and metals. South Korea is beginning to expand energy imports from Canada, not just to reduce dependence on Middle Eastern energy sources, but to use it as a strategic stepping stone to access the North American market without worrying about U.S. tariffs. So why is South Korea turning to Canada? With abundant oil and mineral reserves, Canada is the perfect partner for South Korea, a nation with great energy and raw material needs. Trump's tariff policies are not only affecting finished goods, but also raising the price of basic raw material imports. This forces South Korea to find a new way forward. And Canada, with its strategic position and rich resources, has become the alternative. Canada may be the key gateway for South Korea to access the North American market without facing U.S. tariff barriers. Trade in oil, gas, and steel between South Korea and Canada not only helps Seoul mitigate damage from U.S. tariffs, but also opens up new trade opportunities for both nations. This is the crucial point in South Korea's trade strategy, now that it can no longer rely on the U.S. as it once did. Canada, despite being a longtime ally of the U.S., is now looking to reduce its dependence on the American market with the changing trade policies under Trump. And South Korea is the partner Canada is seeking to build a more independent and stronger trade network. What seemed like a small partnership could end up creating a new supply chain, connecting North America and Asia, reshaping global trade dynamics. In this context, what we must ask ourselves, could this new relationship truly spark a revolution in trade flows? Not just between South Korea and Canada, but across the entire global trading world? The benefits that Canada could gain from this partnership, from oil and gas to minerals, will not only transform their economy, but also reshape international relations. So, is this the beginning of a new powerful trade network between North America and Asia? And could this be the path South Korea takes in the future to avoid the risks of US tariffs while expanding its influence in the region? One thing is certain. This change is not just a short-term trade strategy. South Korea and Canada are forging a partnership that could deeply impact the global economy. And if this plan succeeds, not only South Korea, but also Canada will emerge as major winners in a rapidly changing trade world. Will the US be able to maintain its dominant position in this shifting landscape? Or will North America and Asia become more independent regions within the global trading system?